Did you know that Corona's distinctive taste comes from century-old European brewing traditions brought to Mexico? What began with German immigrants introducing bottom fermentation techniques forever changed Mexican brewing. But how did these centuries-old methods survive the journey across the Atlantic to become Mexico's iconic beer? In the next few minutes, you'll see exactly how this beloved drink travels from barley fields to your bottle. We are set to discover what makes this the best-selling Mexican beer in the world, including some surprising packaging choices that we'll explore later. The journey behind every Corona connects traditional brewing wisdom with modern Mexican craftsmanship. Ever wonder why Corona tastes different from other Mexican beers? The answer isn't found in Mexico at all, but rather in the European brewing traditions that made their way across the ocean in the 19th century. While many assume Corona is a purely Mexican creation, its distinctive character actually stems from a surprising European connection that fundamentally transformed brewing throughout Mexico. The story begins during a fascinating historical period, the brief reign of Emperor Maximilian of Austria between 1864 and 1867. This short-lived Austrian rule brought an influx of German and Austrian immigrants to Mexico, who arrived in a land of vibrant markets, colonial architecture, and culinary traditions already centuries old. These immigrant brewers brought centuries of European brewing expertise, pioneering a fusion of techniques that would create something entirely new amid Mexico's sun-drenched landscape. The European brewers introduced bottom fermentation methods to Mexico, a technique radically different from the top fermenting yeasts common in traditional Mexican brewing. This European approach uses specialized yeast strains that sink to the bottom of the fermentation vessel, working slowly at cooler temperatures over extended periods. Like a patient artist, carefully blending colors rather than making bold, quick strokes. The cold, slow fermentation creates the crisp, clean characteristics that Corona became famous for, setting it apart from the warmer fermented beverages that previously dominated Mexican drinking culture. These immigrant brewers faced significant challenges, from sourcing unfamiliar ingredients to adapting their techniques to Mexico's climate, yet their perseverance transformed the country's brewing landscape. The European influence continued when Adolf H. Smettier, a German immigrant with a vision, founded Cerveceria Modelo in 1925. Smettier developed a crisp, refreshing Pilsner-style brew that skillfully blended European brewing precision with Mexican elements, creating what would eventually become Corona, a beer that would redefine Mexico's brewing identity globally. The bottom fermentation technique required specialized equipment, particularly early refrigeration and conditioning rooms that weren't previously common in Mexican brewing. These innovations allowed for precise temperature control during the extended fermentation period, sometimes lasting 3 times longer than traditional methods. The result? A beer with significantly less fruitiness and a cleaner, more subtle profile. The true magic happened as European techniques merged with Mexican ingredients. Brewers incorporated local corn alongside traditional barley, creating lighter, sweeter profiles uniquely suited to Mexico's climate and culinary traditions. This groundbreaking endeavor not only redefined brewing then, but its influence is still felt in every bottle today. The difference between Corona and traditional Mexican drinks like pulque is striking. While pulque offers complex, sometimes funky flavors with higher alcohol content, Corona's European-influenced brewing process creates a consistently light body and mild flavor profile that's exceptionally refreshing in hot weather, perhaps explaining its global popularity as a beach and outdoor beverage. That distinctive Corona taste, it's not just good brewing, it's like a symphony of agricultural artistry that begins hundreds of miles from the brewery. While European techniques shaped Corona's character, the true secret to its global consistency lies in the carefully selected Mexican ingredients that go into every bottle. Corona's journey begins in the sun-drenched fields of Baja California and Sonora, where golden barley varieties sway under the brilliant Mexican sky. These amber grains develop a unique sweetness and crisp character under Mexico's intense sunlight, creating a landscape as beautiful as it is functional. Unlike your neighborhood craft brewery that might experiment with different grain sources each season, Corona's agricultural team monitors these fields with scientific precision. They're not just growing barley, they're cultivating consistency in every grain. Each barley harvest undergoes extensive testing for exact starch content and protein levels. You might think beer is just about flavor, but for Corona, it's about chemistry. The perfect Corona requires barley with precisely balanced components that will later transform into that refreshing taste you recognize, whether you're drinking it in Mexico City or Manhattan. After the careful harvest, the journey continues as the barley enters the critical malting phase. This three-step process begins with soaking the grains in water until they begin to sprout. These tiny germinating seedlings are developing the essential enzymes that will later convert starches to fermentable sugars. Then comes the kilt drying at specific temperatures, not too hot to destroy the enzymes, but hot enough to halt germination at exactly the right moment. This delicate balance ensures Corona maintains both its signature golden color and the perfect enzyme profile for fermentation. Here's something surprising. Corona deliberately includes corn in its recipe. While some beer purists might raise an eyebrow, Corona's brewmasters use this ingredient strategically. This isn't about saving money, it's about creating that lighter body and subtle sweetness that makes Corona pair so perfectly with a lime wedge. This ingredient choice reflects a deep understanding of how Corona is typically enjoyed, outdoors, often with citrus in warm weather. Even the water receives extraordinary attention. Corona sources water from deep wells at their brewery locations. But that's just the beginning. When you taste Corona's clean finish, you're experiencing water that's been precisely engineered through extensive filtration to create the perfect brewing foundation. The hops in Corona tell another interesting story. Unlike heavily hopped craft IPAs, Corona's brewers select varieties specifically for their mild bitterness. This restraint allows the crisp malt character to remain the star of the show, creating Corona's refreshing drinkability rather than challenging your palate with intense hop notes. Before any ingredient enters production, it passes through Corona's quality control laboratories, the final gatekeepers of consistency that ensure your Corona tastes the same, regardless of where or when you drink it. Once those carefully inspected ingredients enter Corona's production facility, they begin a transformation journey where scientific precision meets calculated risk-taking. Did you know that the signature clear bottle that made Corona instantly recognizable worldwide actually breaks one of brewing's oldest rules? This deliberate choice between visual appeal and flavor protection reveals everything about how Corona's makers balance tradition against innovation. The clear glass bottle stands as Corona's most controversial production decision. Like an artist choosing a clean canvas over traditional materials, Corona chose transparency, despite knowing that ultraviolet light can trigger a chemical reaction known as light struck. This reaction transforms hop compounds into compounds similar to those produced by skunks, potentially creating undesirable flavors. Corona's marketing team gambled that the iconic beach-ready look would outweigh these flavor concerns. To compensate for this packaging vulnerability, Corona's brewing process must be absolutely flawless. After quality testing, the ingredients enter massive stainless steel fermentation tanks. Temperature control becomes everything. These towering vessels maintain precise cold temperatures throughout the 20-day fermentation period. This extended time frame allows the bottom-fermenting yeast to slowly convert sugars into alcohol while developing Corona's characteristically clean flavor profile. But wait, the real magic happens next. Corona undergoes an extended lagering process, a German-inspired technique where the freshly fermented beer rests at temperatures just above freezing for several weeks. During this period, the remaining yeast particles gradually settle to the bottom of the tanks, and the flavors mellow and harmonize. This patience-demanding step gives Corona its smooth, crisp character that drinkers worldwide recognize. The clarity in your Corona bottle doesn't happen by accident either. After lagering, the beer passes through sophisticated filtration systems that remove virtually all remaining yeast and protein particles. This filtration creates that crystal-clear appearance that consumers expect, though it represents another careful compromise. Some flavor compounds get filtered out along with the particles. Corona's brewers have calibrated this process to remove just enough to achieve clarity while preserving the essential flavor components. As impressive as the brewing process is, what happens next might surprise you. Corona's bottling operation showcases modern manufacturing at its most efficient. The production lines handle thousands of bottles per hour in a precisely choreographed dance of machinery. Empty bottles race through sanitizing stations before filling equipment dispenses exactly the right amount of beer into each one. Computer-controlled systems monitor fill levels, while high-speed cameras inspect for any imperfections. Random bottles are pulled for quality testing throughout the shift, ensuring consistency across every batch. This attention to detail continues right through packaging. Full bottles undergo multiple visual inspections, both automated and human, checking for proper fill levels, secure caps, and correct labeling. The slightest deviation triggers rejection. This meticulous approach explains why your Corona tastes remarkably consistent, whether you're drinking it in Mexico City or Manhattan. And there you have it, the fascinating journey of Corona. From its European brewing roots to becoming an iconic Mexican beer enjoyed around the world. Ever notice how Corona is almost always served with a lime wedge? This tradition began practically, cleaning bottle rims before drinking, but evolved into an essential flavor enhancement. The lime's acidity perfectly balances Corona's sweet corn notes while traditionally keeping flies away from open bottles. Corona brings back memories of beach sunsets with friends, shares Miguel, a longtime fan. Today, Corona represents more than just a beer. It's a cultural symbol transcending borders. That distinctive clear bottle has become synonymous with relaxation worldwide. So next time you squeeze that lime into your Corona, you're participating in a century-old tradition of brewing expertise and cultural fusion. Share your favorite Corona moments.